Everyone expected the funeral to be quiet, but instead it became a scene of chaos no one would ever forget. Everyone in the chapel froze when the massive police German shepherd climbed into the little girl's coffin. At first, the officers thought he was confused, grieving, refusing to let go of the only child who had ever shown him kindness. But when the police dog pressed his head gently against her tiny chest, then refused to move, panic rippled through the room. People screamed, thinking he had gone mad. Officers tried to pull him away, but he growled, something he had never done in his entire service. "Why is the dog acting like this?" someone whispered. "And why does he keep nudging the girl's hand as if begging her to wake up?" He knew something everyone else didn't. He was warning them. But for what? No one at the funeral understood what was happening. He growled at anyone who got too close, his grief roaring deeper than anyone imagined. Everyone thought this was just a heartbreaking goodbye. And then he began scratching wildly, whimpering, barking, tearing at the coffin like he was trying to dig someone out. Her parents stood in shock. Mourners whispered in confusion. One of the officers, trembling, whispered, "Why won't the dog leave her side? What is he sensing?" Then her mother collapsed to her knees, and a whisper spread through the room. "Why is the dog acting like she's still alive?" But no one had any answer. The police dog was trying to tell them something no one was prepared to hear. What happened next shocked everyone. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious. Where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The funeral chapel was drowning in silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, suffocating silence that clings to every heartbeat and refuses to let go. Rows of mourners filled the room, their faces pale, their expressions frozen between disbelief and heartbreak. No one could accept what they were seeing. No one believed they should have been standing here today, saying goodbye to a child who hadn't even learned to spell her own name yet. At the center of the chapel, beneath the shimmering light of the chandelier, lay a small white coffin trimmed with soft lace. Inside it was a little girl no older than 5, her auburn curls brushed neatly around her delicate face. She looked as though she was merely sleeping, peaceful, untouched by the tragedy that had stolen her life far too soon. A blue dress wrapped her tiny frame, and a silver bracelet encircled her wrist, a gift from her mother just weeks before. But it wasn't the girl who left the crowd stunned. It was the massive German shepherd lying inside the coffin with her, the dog's enormous frame curled protectively around her body, his head resting gently on her shoulder as though guarding her one last time. His eyes dark, glassy, and full of unbearable grief, shifted only when someone tried to approach. A low rumble vibrated in his chest, warning them to stay back. He wasn't aggressive. He was heartbroken, and no one had the heart to pull him away. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mothers pressed hands over their mouths. Fathers held back tears. Even officers in full uniform stood frozen, unsure how to react. This wasn't normal. No police dog had ever behaved like this. Not at a funeral, not anywhere. The little girl's parents stood at a distance, unable to step closer. Her mother trembled violently, clutching her husband's arm as silent sobs shook through her. Her father stared blankly, unable to process the scene in front of him. Their daughter and the dog, who refused to let her go. Officer Harlan, standing near the back, felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had been the one who responded to the call the night the girl died. He had seen the dog's reaction, heard the desperate howls, watched the animal refused to leave her side even then. But nothing prepared him for this. A funeral was supposed to be a final goodbye. Yet, the dog's behavior whispered something else entirely, as if he didn't believe this was goodbye at all. And deep down, Harlan felt an unsettling truth rising in his chest. Something about this funeral didn't feel right. Whispers rippled through the chapel as mourners watched the German shepherd with a mixture of shock and aching sorrow. No matter how gently people called his name, no matter how softly they tried to coax him out, the dog refused to move even an inch. His body rose and fell in slow, trembling breaths. But his gaze never left the little girl's still face. Every time someone attempted to approach the coffin, he lifted his head and released a low warning growl, not from aggression, but from pure, desperate protectiveness. Officer Mills, one of the senior officers present, stepped forward cautiously. "Easy, boy," he murmured, hands out in a calming gesture. But the moment he neared the coffin, the dog lowered his ears, bared his teeth ever so slightly, and pushed his head closer against the girl's shoulder, shielding her, guarding her, refusing to let anyone come near. Mills backed away slowly, shaken. He's not letting anyone touch her. A wave of discomfort rolled through the room. People exchanged uneasy glances. Some cried harder, unable to bear the sight of such loyalty from an animal who clearly believed he still had a job to do. A dog mourning a child was heartbreaking enough. But this wasn't normal grief. This was instinct. This was protection. Almost as though the dog sensed something the humans didn't. The funeral director, an older man with trembling hands, wiped sweat from his brow. "We've never seen anything like this," he whispered. "He's been like this since they brought her in. He hasn't eaten, he hasn't drunk water. He just lies there watching her." From the back of the chapel, Harlan watched intently. The dog named Rex had worked with him before. Harlan knew how disciplined, how obedient, how sharply intelligent he was. A K9 trained at the highest level didn't just ignore commands. He didn't ignore familiar voices. And he definitely didn't break protocol at a funeral. So why now? Nearby, a woman sobbed softly. "He loved her so much," she whispered to another. "She used to feed him treats through the fence. They were inseparable." The person beside her nodded, though fear clouded her expression. "But why is he acting like this? It's almost like he's warning us." Rex suddenly lifted his head, ears twitching sharply. His eyes swept across the room, searching, analyzing. And then he froze, his muscles stiffened, his breath quickened. He locked his gaze on someone standing among the officers. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from his chest, low, long, and furious. The chapel went silent. No one knew why the dog reacted this way, but Harlan felt his heart drop. Rex wasn't just mourning, he was accusing. All eyes slowly shifted toward the direction of Rex's growl. The officers standing along the wall stiffened, exchanging quick, uneasy glances. But the German shepherd wasn't confused, nor was he reacting randomly. His gaze was sharp, locked with laser-focused intensity on one man in particular, Officer Vance Reed. Reed stood frozen among the other officers, his posture rigid, his jaw clenched tight. He was normally calm, collected, even admired for his discipline. But now, under the weight of Rex's unblinking stare, something flickered across his face. A momentary twitch, a crack in his controlled expression. He shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his tie, even though it wasn't crooked. A whisper rustled through the crowd like a cold draft. "Why is the dog staring at him like that? Does he know him? What's going on?" Harlan narrowed his eyes. Rex didn't react like this to just anyone. He wasn't easily startled, and he never growled without purpose. The dog's training was built on identifying danger, on detecting lies, on reading the unspoken. And right now, everything about his body language screamed one message. Something about Officer Reed wasn't right. Rex pressed his head protectively against the girl's body, as if shielding her from the man across the room. His ears were pinned flat, a sign of distress. His muscles trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. He wanted to move. He wanted to confront, but he stayed at the child's side, torn between devotion and instinct. Reed cleared his throat, attempting to steady himself. "What's wrong with that dog?" he asked, forcing a laugh. It came out thin and brittle. "He's acting like I did something." His attempt at humor fell dead in the air. No one smiled. Harlan stepped forward slightly, watching Reed's reactions with the trained eye of someone who had interrogated countless suspects. The man avoided eye contact with the Coffin. He kept glancing at the exit. His fingers tapped at his belt, restless and uneven. Rex growled again, louder this time. Reed flinched. That small reaction didn't go unnoticed. A murmur rippled through the officers. Mills leaned closer to Harlan and whispered, "You seeing this too?" Harlan nodded slowly, his gut twisted. Rex wasn't aggressive by nature. If anything, he was famously calm. But now he acted as if Reed carried a scent he couldn't ignore. One he associated with danger, with threat, with guilt. Reed's voice finally cracked. "Someone get that animal under control." Harlan's eyebrows lifted. Animals don't lie. Dogs don't accuse without reason. And Rex, a highly trained K9, had just singled out a police officer at a child's funeral. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. Long before the funeral, long before the tragedy that shattered an entire community, Rex had been nothing more than a disciplined, highly trained police dog assigned to Officer Harlan. He was strong, fearless, and focused until the day he met a little girl with auburn curls and an innocent smile that melted even the hardest hearts. It happened on an afternoon patrol. Harlan had stopped by a quiet coastal neighborhood in Seaside Bay, checking on a series of break-ins reported over the week. Rex was sniffing along the sidewalk when he suddenly froze. Harlan braced himself, expecting danger, only to hear a tiny giggle from behind a white picket fence. A small face popped out from behind a bush. A little girl, barely reaching Harlan's waist, held out a crumbly cookie in her hand. "Doggy!" she squealed. "You're the biggest puppy ever!" Rex, the same dog who could take down armed criminals, sat down obediently and tilted his head. The little girl stepped forward without fear and gently placed the cookie into his jaws. Harlan was stunned. Rex never took food from strangers. Never. But for her, he broke every rule. From that day, the girl named Emma waited for Rex and Harlan every afternoon. She'd run out barefoot, carrying crumbs in her tiny palms, waving wildly until Rex trotted over to her. She didn't care that he was a K9. To her, he was simply Rexy. She'd wrap her arms around his neck, burying her face into his fur, giggling as he nudged her gently with his nose. Rex, usually stoic and unemotional, softened around her. His tail wagged, his posture relaxed. His eyes gleamed with a warmth Harlan had never seen before. Emma's mother once stood on the porch, smiling sadly. "She doesn't have many friends," she confessed softly. "She's always been shy, but that dog, he brings out a different side of her." Harlan nodded, watching the girl braid flowers into Rex's collar. "She's good for him, too," he admitted. Never seen him so calm. Over the months, their bond only grew. Rex listened to her voice more attentively than to Harlan's commands. If she cried, he laid beside her until she stopped. If she laughed, he climbed onto his paws, excited and alert. And every time Harlan tried to lead him away, Rex would look back at her as if promising he'd return. To Emma, Rex wasn't just a dog. He was her guardian, her friend, her silent protector. And to Rex, she was the one soul he would give everything for. No one knew then how important that bond would become, or how far Rex would go to protect her, even after death. The day Emma died began like any other. sunlight slipping through her bedroom curtains, birds chirping outside, and her tiny feet tapping excitedly across the wooden floor as she prepared to greet her favorite visitor. Rex and Officer Harlan always passed by around the same time, and Emma never missed their arrival. She tugged at her mother's sleeve, begging to wait outside early. "Rexy's coming. I know it." Her mother laughed softly and tied a blue ribbon in her curls. "All right, sweetheart, but stay where I can see you." Emma nodded enthusiastically and skipped to the front yard, clutching a small bag of dog treats she had saved just for him. But that morning, Rex and Harlan never came. Harlan later explained they had been rerouted to a robbery in a nearby district. They had no idea how one small change would shatter everything. Around noon, neighbors reported seeing Emma playing alone near the edge of the street, humming to herself as she arranged her toys. She wasn't supposed to go past the mailbox, but curiosity has no boundaries for a child. A colorful ball rolled from her hands, bouncing toward the sidewalk. Emma chased it, laughing softly, unaware of the danger approaching. A black SUV turned onto the road, driving faster than anyone expected on a quiet street. Witnesses would later say it swerved as if the driver were distracted. Emma's mother screamed her name from the porch, but the little girl didn't hear. The SUV jerked violently. Tires screeched. A chilling thud echoed through the street. By the time neighbors rushed out, Emma lay motionless on the pavement, her blue ribbon fluttering beside her. Her mother collapsed beside her, shrieking for help. The driver, a uniformed police officer, stumbled out of the vehicle, pale and shaking. Officer Vance Reed. He claimed he didn't see her. He claimed she ran out suddenly. He claimed it was a tragic accident. Harlan arrived minutes later, heart pounding, Rex leaping from the patrol car before it had even fully stopped. The dog sprinted across the pavement, whimpering, licking Emma's face, nudging her tiny hands, desperate for a response. But Emma didn't move. Rex's howl tore through the neighborhood, raw, anguished, unforgettable. Paramedics tried everything. Her mother begged, sobbed, prayed, but nothing changed. The official report was filed. The incident was labeled accidental. The case was closed within hours. But even then, something about Officer Reed's behavior unsettled Harlan. Something didn't fit. Something felt wrong. And Rex, who never forgot a scent, would soon reveal the truth. This wasn't just an accident. It was the beginning of a mystery far darker than anyone imagined. In the days following Emma's death, the police department tried to return to normal. But something hung in the air, a heaviness no one could shake. The report had been signed, the case marked accidental, and the file tucked neatly into a drawer. But those who had been on the scene, those who had watched Rex's reaction, and those who noticed the inconsistencies, couldn't let it rest. Harlan sat at his desk late one evening, staring at the thin stack of papers in front of him. The official narrative painted a clean story. Emma had run into the street. Reed had been driving under the speed limit, and everything pointed to a tragic misstep. But the details felt wrong. Too clean, too perfect. And the more Harlan read, the more his gut twisted. Why had Reed been in that neighborhood at that exact time? Why didn't his dashboard camera capture the impact? Why had Rex reacted to him with such violent recognition? He rubbed his jaw, exhaling slowly. Rex lay under his desk. But even in sleep, the dog twitched, whimpered, and growled as though trapped in nightmares only he could understand. Across the room, Officer Mills walked in quietly and shut the door behind him. "Harlan," he said in a low voice. "I heard you're going over the case again." Harlan hesitated before nodding. Mills sighed. "You're not the only one." He dropped a separate file onto Harlan's desk. "I pulled Reed's driving logs. Something's off. His route doesn't match what he reported. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere near Bayview Lane." Harlan's brows tightened. So why was he there? That's just it, Mills murmured, lowering his voice. He refused to answer questions beyond the basics. Said he was following a lead, but he never documented one. Harlan's stomach sank further. He flipped through the pages again. Several neighbors had reported seeing the SUV earlier that morning, circling, slowing, pausing at corners. Reed denied all of it. And then there was the missing footage. The dashcam had automatically shut off minutes before the collision. Reed claimed it malfunctioned, but there was no request for a repair record. No earlier complaints. Cameras don't just die on their own. Mills leaned closer. Rex knows something, Harlan. He's reacting to Reed like he's a threat. Dogs don't fake that. As if on cue, Rex's head snapped up, ears rigid, a low growl humming from his chest. He gazed at the door, the hallway beyond it, as if sensing the man they were discussing. Harlan exchanged a grim look with Mills. Something wasn't just wrong with their report. Something was being hidden. And whatever it was, Rex had known from the very beginning. Rex had barely moved since the funeral. He lay beside Emma's coffin like a statue carved from grief. No food, no water. Only the rise and fall of his chest proved he was still alive. Harlan stayed near him the entire time, keeping a quiet vigil, hoping the dog would eventually let go. But Rex's eyes were always distant, focused on something no one else could see. It happened just after sunrise on the second day of the funeral viewing. The chapel was empty except for Harlan, Rex, and a janitor sweeping quietly in the corner. Harlan knelt beside the coffin, gently brushing his fingers through Rex's fur. "Buddy," he whispered, "you can't stay here forever." Rex didn't look at him. Instead, he pressed his nose against Emma's small hand one last time, and then he moved slowly. At first, lifting his head, shifting his weight, stepping out of the coffin with a reluctant ache that made Harlan's heart crack. It was the first time the dog had left her side in nearly 40 hours. But instead of collapsing in exhaustion, Rex stood alert, nose twitching, ears rising with unmistakable purpose. Harlan frowned. "Rex, what is it?" The dog paced toward the exit, then stopped, looking back at Harlan with urgent eyes. He barked, short, sharp, insistent. Not a cry of pain, not a plea for comfort, a command. Rex darted toward the door again, pawing at it this time, whining impatiently. The janitor jumped, startled by the sudden shift in energy. Harlan rose to his feet, tension surging through him. "You want me to follow you?" Rex barked again. Harlan didn't need a third cue. He grabbed his jacket, pushed the door open, and allowed Rex to lead. The dog sprinted down the hallway with determination, nose pressed low to the ground, weaving left and right as if tracing a scent he had memorized. His muscles trembled with urgency. They burst out of the funeral home into the crisp morning air. Rex didn't pause. He shot down the sidewalk, turned at the intersection, and headed straight into the residential neighborhood where Emma had lived. Harlan felt chills run along his arms. "Rex, why here?" The dog stopped abruptly in the middle of the street. His body stiffened, his tail dropped. He growled deep, low, dangerous. Harlan followed the line of Rex's stare, and his blood went cold. Parked at the end of the street, half hidden behind a row of bushes, was the same black SUV from the day Emma died. Officer Reed's SUV. Rex stepped forward, hackles rising. For the first time, Harlan understood. Rex didn't leave the coffin to mourn. He left it to lead them to the truth. Harlan stood frozen, staring at the black SUV like it was a ghost resurrected from the past. The vehicle sat quietly at the curb, cold and still, its windows darkened. Rex growled again, inching closer, nose quivering as if confirming a scent he already knew too well. Harlan's pulse hammered in his ears. "What are you trying to show me, boy?" he whispered. Rex pressed his nose to the driver's door, then whipped around and barked sharply, demanding. "Urgent," Harlan swallowed hard. If the SUV was here, Reed couldn't be far, and if Reed was nearby, why was he hiding? Harlan called Mills immediately. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived. Mills stepped out, eyes narrowing at the sight of the SUV. "That's Reed's," he muttered. "But he's supposed to be off duty today." Rex tugged at Harlan's pant leg, pulling him toward Emma's house. Harlan felt his stomach twist. "He wants us inside," he said. They followed Rex around the side gate into a basement door that hung slightly open. It shouldn't have been. Emma's parents had left town for the funeral, and no one else had permission to enter. Mills frowned. "We need probable cause to search." A sound echoed from inside, a small thump, a shuffle. Rex lunged, barking furiously, trying to push his way in. Harlan didn't hesitate. He swung the door open. The basement was dimly lit, filled with storage boxes and old toys. But Rex wasn't sniffing for scents. He was heading straight for the home surveillance setup on the far wall. Harlan's breath caught. A monitor was still on. Someone had been watching the footage. Mills stepped closer, eyes widening as he rewound the video. "This is from the day Emma died," he whispered. "Look on the screen." Emma played happily in the yard. The recording should have shown her running toward the street, but instead something else appeared. Reed's SUV creeping down the block much earlier than he claimed. Rex whined sharply as Mills slowed the footage. Reed wasn't distracted. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't even looking forward. He was watching something on his phone. Text messages. Repeated messages. Something or someone had been instructing him. Harlan felt his jaw clench. He lied. And then the crucial moment. Emma didn't run into the road. She stopped. She looked up. Her mouth opened to say something, and then she stepped backward, startled as Reed's SUV swerved directly toward her. Mills slammed his fist against the table. This wasn't an accident. Rex barked in agreement, his eyes locked on the screen, but the worst part, a second figure appeared off camera. Just a shadow, just a movement. Someone else had been there, and that someone didn't want Emma alive. By the time the sun dipped behind the rooftops, the station was buzzing with whispers. Harlan and Mills had brought in the newly uncovered footage, and word had spread like wildfire. For the first time since Emma's death, officers were questioning the man they once trusted without hesitation. Officer Vance Reed. Reed sat inside interview room 3, tapping his fingers nervously against the cold metal table. His uniform looked crisp, but his face betrayed him, sweat gathering beneath his collar, jaw twitching every few seconds. He kept glancing at the door, waiting for someone to tell him he was free to go. No one did. Harlan entered with a tablet under his arm. Rex followed, leash tight, posture rigid. The dog's eyes narrowed the moment he saw Reed. His growl wasn't loud this time, not like at the funeral, but it was deep, controlled, dangerous. Reed stiffened. "Get that dog out," he snapped sharply. "I don't feel safe with it here." Harlan ignored him and took a seat. "Funny," he said quietly. "Rex has never had a problem with anyone before." "Only you?" Reed scoffed, but it came out shaky. "He's an animal. Animals get confused." "No," Harlan said calmly. "Rex doesn't get confused. He remembers scents, he remembers fear, and he remembers guilt." Reed's jaw clenched. "Are you accusing me of something?" Harlan placed the tablet on the table and pressed play. The footage began to roll, the SUV creeping down Bayview Lane long before the incident. Reed's face paled instantly. He swallowed hard. "This isn't what it looks like." "It looks like you were lying," Harlan replied. It looks like you were patrolling a street you weren't assigned to, and your dash cam conveniently shut off the moment things went wrong." Reed shifted in his chair, breathing quickening. "I told you it malfunctioned." Mills entered the room, arms crossed. "That's funny," he said, "because tech checked it this afternoon. No malfunction, no wiring issue. Someone turned it off manually." Reed's lips parted, but no words came out. Rex stepped forward, eyes locked on him, his nose twitched. He remembered the scent of the man who held Emma moments before she died, and he remembered the fear she felt. Harlan leaned forward. "Why were you near her house hours before the accident? Why didn't you report being in the neighborhood? What were you doing?" Reed's voice cracked. "I was following up on something." "On what?" Mills pressed. Reed looked away, his breathing turned shallow. I can't say," Rex barked sharply, startling him. Harlan's eyes hardened. "Can't," he said slowly, "or won't." Reed finally met Harlan's stare, and in that moment Harlan knew. Reed wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting someone else, and that someone was still out there. Rex had been silent for hours, lying at Harlan's feet while Reed's interrogation dragged on. But the moment Harlan stepped into the evidence room to review the recovered items from the SUV, something inside the dog changed. His ears shot up, his body stiffened, his nose lifted into the air, scenting something only he could detect. Harlan noticed immediately. "You smell something?" Rex didn't answer. He leapt. He rushed to a shelf stacked with sealed bags, clawing aggressively at one in the middle row. Officers nearby jumped back in alarm. Harlan hurried toward him, eyes narrowing on the label. E-47 recovered from Reed's SUV trunk. Unidentified fabric. Rex whined loudly, pawing the bag as if begging Harlan to open it. The dog's distress was raw, trembling, unmistakable. Harlan exchanged a look with Mills. "Open it," he ordered. A technician sliced the seal. The moment the bag opened, Rex shoved his nose inside, then let out a piercing, broken howl that echoed through the entire room. The kind of howl only heard when a dog finds a missing child, or the last thing that belonged to them. Inside the bag was a small piece of fabric, glittery, blue, a ripped fragment of a dress. Emma's dress. Mills exhaled sharply. This wasn't listed in the original report. Harlan's hands trembled as he held the fabric. Her mother said the dress she wore that day was intact when she bought it. There were no tears. Rex nudged the fabric again, sniffing with deep, frantic breaths. Then suddenly he snapped his head toward the door, barking furiously. Harlan frowned. "You want us to follow again?" Rex bolted into the hallway. Mills hurried after him. "He's tracking something." A scent from the cloth. The dog sprinted through the corridors, down the stairwell, and out the back exit of the station. Night air hit them like a cold slap. Rex didn't slow. His nose stayed glued to the ground. He wasn't following Emma's scent. He was following something or someone that had been close to her. Rex came to a stop behind the station near the dumpsters. He barked sharply at a corner of the lot, an area where officers usually smoked or made private calls. Harlan's flashlight swept the ground. His breath hitched. A set of footprints partially smudged, leading away from the station. Mills knelt beside them. "These aren't Reed's boots." Rex lowered his head and growled, deep and furious. Someone else had handled Emma before she died. Someone who left traces behind. Someone still close to the department. Harlan felt his blood run cold. "This wasn't just Reed," he whispered. Rex barked once, sharp, certain. It was bigger, much bigger. The discovery of Emma's torn dress fragment changed everything. Within the hour, Harlan and Mills were in the medical examiner's office, Rex pacing anxiously at their heels. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a cold blue hue across the examination room. The air felt heavy. too heavy for a place meant to bring clarity. Dr. Ellis, the chief medical examiner, stood by a metal table, her gloves already on. She looked tired, troubled. "I reviewed the initial report," she said quietly. "The autopsy was rushed. Too rushed. They classified the cause of death as blunt force trauma based on external injuries alone." She paused, eyes darkening. "There were things I questioned that day, but I was told to sign off quickly." Harlan exchanged a sharp look with Mills. "Told by who?" Ellis hesitated. "Reed. He said the department needed answers fast." Rex whined, nudging the table leg with his nose, restless and uneasy. Ellis opened the second file, the photos, the notes, the outlines of Emma's injuries. But she didn't stop there. She pulled out new scans she performed that morning after Harlan urgently requested a second look. She pointed to an image here. The bruising pattern on her ribs. Mills leaned in. "That's not consistent with being hit by a car." Ellis nodded grimly. "Exactly." "These marks," she traced a gloved finger over the diagram, "are from being grabbed hard by adult hands." Harlan felt his stomach drop. "And these," Ellis continued, flipping to another scan, "are compression marks on her upper arms." She met their eyes. She didn't fall into the road. She was restrained. Rex let out a deep, trembling growl, the kind that came from recognizing something he couldn't verbalize. Ellis swallowed. "There's more." She brought up a magnified image of Emma's neck. "Petechiae burst blood vessels. This is usually seen in cases of oxygen deprivation. Someone covered her mouth or pressed something over her face right before the impact." Mills stepped back, horrified. So she was already unconscious when the SUV hit her. Harlan's voice barely came out. "Meaning the car wasn't what killed her?" Ellis nodded slowly. "Correct. The vehicle impact didn't cause her death. She died moments before it." Rex abruptly barked, loud, sharp, insistent. He moved to the corner of the room, claws scraping against the floor, nose pushing against the cabinet containing Emma's personal items collected from the scene. Ellis frowned. That cabinet was sealed. Mills walked over, opened it, then froze. Inside was a small, glittering pin, a police lapel pin. Not Reed's. Not from his department. Harlan felt a chill crawl through him. Someone else had been with Emma. Someone higher ranked. Someone protected. Rex stared at the pin, growling. The truth was unraveling, and the real culprit had just stepped into the light. The room felt colder after the discovery of the mysterious police lapel pin. A tiny object, but heavy enough to shift the entire investigation. Harlan turned it over in his hand, staring at the engraved initials. R.L. Mills's voice trembled. "That pin belongs to Deputy Chief Roland Langford, one of the highest-ranking officers in the department." Harlan's chest tightened. Langford was respected, feared, and almost untouchable, but the presence of his pin among Emma's belongings was impossible to ignore and impossible to explain away. Rex paced restlessly, sniffing the air, nudging Harlan's leg, urging him again. He wasn't done. He hadn't shown them everything. "Where now, boy?" Harlan whispered. Rex sprinted for the door. Mills and Harlan exchanged a tense look before following him out of the medical examiner's office, through the hallway, and into the parking lot. The dog's nose stayed glued to the ground, tracing the scent from the pin, the dress fragment, the evidence no human could interpret as precisely as he could. Rex suddenly veered left toward the restricted section of the police lot where senior staff vehicles were parked. Harlan's pulse quickened. "Is he going to Langford's car?" Mills muttered. Rex didn't stop at the deputy chief's black SUV. He sniffed it, growled once, then kept going. Past the lot, past the station, toward a path leading behind the precinct, one most officers never used. The narrow walkway was overgrown with weeds and led to a maintenance shed used for old equipment and storage. No cameras, no foot traffic, isolated. Rex halted in front of the rusted door and barked with fierce urgency. Harlan's hand hovered over the handle. This shed. No one's used it in years. Mills shook his head. Not officially. Harlan pushed the door open. A wave of cold, stale air drifted out. The interior was dim, but a faint glow flickered from a light in the back. Dust swirled in the beam of Harlan's flashlight as he stepped inside. Rex darted to a large metal locker along the back wall. He pawed violently, claws scraping metal, barking like his heart might break. Harlan yanked the locker open. Inside were items that didn't belong there. A child's backpack, a pair of tiny shoes, a blood-stained cloth, and a small stuffed toy, Emma's favorite bear. Mills stepped closer, horrified. Dear God, these were never in evidence. Rex nudged the bear gently, his eyes reflecting raw, aching grief. Then he turned his head sharply toward a stack of documents shoved behind a toolbox. Harlan pulled them out. Pages of secret communications, unauthorized call logs, and surveillance photos of Emma taken days before she died. Mills's voice cracked. This wasn't an accident. This was planned. Rex growled at the doorway because someone was watching them. Someone who didn't want them discovering the truth hidden inside the shed. Harlan's flashlight trembled in his hand as the shadows in the shed shifted. Mills stepped forward instinctively, placing himself between the door and Harlan, his hand hovering near his holster. Rex's growl deepened, low, rumbling, ready to erupt if needed. Someone was outside, someone who had followed them, someone who wasn't supposed to know they were here. A slow crunch of gravel, a faint exhale, and then Deputy Chief Roland Langford stepped into view. His uniform was immaculate, his posture calm, but his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, landed on the shed with unmistakable menace. "Officers," he said, voice smooth as glass, "why are we rummaging through restricted property?" Harlan felt a chill crawl down his spine. Langford didn't ask what they had found. He already knew. Mills spoke carefully. "Sir, we found evidence related to Emma's case, evidence that shouldn't have been here." Langford's expression didn't shift, not even a flinch. "Then close that locker and forget whatever you think you've discovered." Rex barked viciously, lunging forward, teeth flashing. Harlan held him back, but the dog didn't stop snarling. Langford watched him with thinly veiled disdain. "That dog," Langford murmured, "has been a problem from day one." Harlan's blood boiled. Rex found Emma's belongings. "You didn't think anyone would ever look here, did you?" Langford sighed, almost bored. "I tried to handle this quietly. You two had no involvement in this investigation anymore. Yet here you are making things complicated." Mills stepped closer. "You were there the day Emma died." Langford didn't deny it. Harlan's chest tightened. "Why? Why would you be anywhere near her?" A long, chilling pause followed. Then Langford finally spoke. "Reed wasn't acting alone," he said calmly. "He was following orders. Mine." Harlan felt the world tilt. Langford continued, voice eerily steady. "A complaint was filed against me, a harassment accusation from Emma's mother." He shook his head. "Unfounded, of course, but a scandal like that destroys careers, families, everything." Mills stared at him in horror. "So, you tried to scare her? Threaten her?" Langford smirked. "I only told Reed to remind her who she was dealing with." Unfortunately, he panicked. The girl ran. Things escalated. Harlan's voice cracked. "You covered it up." "Of course I did," Langford replied coldly. "For the sake of the department." Rex barked violently, pulling so hard that Harlan nearly lost grip. Langford took a step forward, and that's when the truth became undeniable. Rex didn't growl because Langford was guilty. Rex growled because he recognized Langford's scent. The same scent from Emma's torn dress. The same scent from the pin in her belongings. The same scent from the person who grabbed her. Emma hadn't stepped into the road at all. She had been running away from Langford. And Rex had known it from the very beginning. The moment Langford stepped forward, Rex lunged with a fury no one had ever seen before. Harlan barely held him back as the German shepherd snapped and snarled, teeth bared, every muscle trembling with rage. Langford didn't flinch. He simply smirked, lifting a hand as if shooing away a stray dog. "You can't prove anything," he said calmly. "The girl is gone. The report is closed, and you two are overstepping your rank." But Harlan wasn't listening anymore. Not to the words. Not to the threats. He was focused on Rex because the dog wasn't growling at Langford's face. He was growling at Langford's jacket, more specifically at the faint bulge inside the inner pocket. "Mills," Harlan whispered urgently. "Check his coat." Langford's eyes flickered just enough to give him away. Mills moved in, but Langford reacted faster. He grabbed the jacket edge, ripped it open, and sprinted toward the shed exit. Harlan shoved Rex aside. "Go." Rex bolted after him, claws scraping the dirt, his powerful body launching forward like a missile. Langford reached the trees behind the shed, but the dog was faster. He tackled Langford to the ground, pinning him with his full weight, snarling inches from the man's throat. Harlan and Mills arrived seconds later, wrestling Langford's arms behind his back, as Rex growled continuously, refusing to move until the cuffs were secure. Something fell from Langford's pocket and hit the ground with a soft clink. A small locket, blue, glittery. Emma's. Mills picked it up with trembling hands. He kept her locket all this time. Langford spat on the ground. She shouldn't have fought back. Rex barked, a vicious, fury-filled bark that shook every nerve in Harlan's body. But before Harlan could process anything, Mills's radio crackled. "Unit 3, urgent update. You need to return to the medical center immediately." Harlan grabbed the radio. "What happened?" A trembling voice answered. "It's about Emma." Harlan's heart froze. Minutes later, Rex and the officers rushed back to the medical center. Langford now in cuffs, cursing under his breath. The hallway was filled with frantic nurses and staff. Harlan pushed through the crowd. "Where is she?" he demanded. A doctor stepped forward, eyes wide. "We were preparing to transfer her to the morgue when her fingers twitched." Harlan's breath caught. Rex whimpered softly. "What are you saying?" Harlan whispered. The doctor swallowed hard. "Emma is alive." The world seemed to stop. Rex let out a soft, broken whine, half disbelief, half joy, and sprinted toward the recovery room. Harlan followed, heart pounding so violently he could barely breathe. Inside the small room, Emma lay on a hospital bed, pale but breathing. Her eyelids fluttered. Her tiny hand twitched. Rex climbed beside her gently, pressing his nose into her palm. Her fingers curled around him. Harlan's eyes filled with tears. Against all odds, against every lie, against the man who tried to silence her, Emma was alive. The hospital room was silent, except for the soft, rhythmic beep of the monitors and the gentle breaths of a child who was never supposed to open her eyes again. Harlan stood frozen in the doorway, unable to speak, unable to think, barely able to believe what he was seeing. Emma's fingers moved again, curling instinctively around Rex's fur as the dog pressed himself against her side, trembling with relief. Her mother rushed into the room moments later, collapsing to her knees with a choked sob. My baby," she cried, touching Emma's cheeks, her hair, her tiny hands, as if fearing she might disappear again. Her father wrapped his arms around them both, tears falling down his face. Rex watched them quietly, head resting on Emma's shoulder, his chest rising and falling with deep, emotional breaths. For the first time in days, he wasn't growling. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't mourning. He was protecting her just like he always had. Dr. Ellis entered the room cautiously. "She's weak," she whispered, "but stable." The oxygen deprivation caused her to slip into a deep, unconscious state, one that mimicked death. If Rex hadn't reacted at the funeral, we might never have discovered it in time. Harlan swallowed hard. He tried to tell us. He never left her side. Ellis nodded. He saved her. Outside the room, officers gathered in silent shock as news spread. Langford was already in custody, his crimes exposed through the shed evidence, phone records, and Reed's confession. The department was reeling, an entire chain of command shaken by a truth they never imagined existed. Reed, now broken with guilt, admitted Langford's threats and manipulation, revealing the full depth of the cover-up. Mills approached Harlan quietly. "Internal affairs is taking over. Langford won't see daylight again. And Reed, he's cooperating, but he'll be imprisoned too." Harlan exhaled slowly. "It's over then." Mills shook his head. "No, it's over because of Rex." Back in the room, Emma's eyes fluttered open. Her mother gasped, leaning close. "Sweetheart, can you hear me?" Emma blinked, groggy but awake. Her gaze moved slowly across the room until it landed on Rex. A tiny smile formed. "Rexy," she whispered, her voice fragile as paper. Rex's tail thumped gently against the bed. Harlan couldn't hold back anymore. He wiped a stray tear from his cheek. For all his years on the force, all the rescues, all the crimes he'd solved, nothing felt as powerful as this moment. A child saved, a monster exposed, a loyal dog proving once again that some heroes don't wear badges, they protect them. As the sun rose outside the window, casting warm light over the room, Harlan whispered, "You did it, Rex. You brought her back." Rex pressed his head against Emma, eyes closing peacefully. And for the first time since the tragedy began, everything finally felt right.